The night was quiet in Pine Creek, Montana. Too quiet, Jack Miller thought as he worked late in his garage. The only sounds came from his tools and the old radio playing soft country music. At 42, Jack had settled into small-town life. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL, his large hands, now fixing a carburetor, still moved with the same careful precision they once used to disarm explosives. A flicker in the lights made Jack look up. The radio crackled with static before going silent. Outside, the motion sensor lights turned on, then off, then on again. Jack put down his wrench and walked to the garage door. He didn't reach for the baseball bat he kept nearby, not yet, but his body tensed, ready. "Anyone there?" he called into the darkness. The trees at the edge of his property stood still. No wind, no animals, nothing. Jack stepped outside. The air felt wrong-heavy and charged like before a lightning storm. He looked up at the clear night sky with its blanket of stars, then froze. One of the stars was moving. Not like a plane or satellite, but in a pattern that made no sense. A bright blue light suddenly poured down from above. Jack tried to move but couldn't. His body felt heavy, then weightless. The ground fell away beneath his feet. The last thing he saw was his garage getting smaller and smaller below him when Sheriff Susan Alvarez arrived at Jack's place the next morning. She found the garage door open and tools scattered across the floor. Jack's half-finished cup of coffee sat cold on the workbench. His truck was still parked outside. "Jack?" she called, her hand resting on her gun. Susan had been sheriff for 8 years, and she knew Jack wasn't the type to leave things a mess or disappear without telling someone. Deputy Frank Rogers joined her, looking concerned. "His phone's still here? Keys too." He pointed to the items. On the bench, Susan walked outside and noticed the strange marks on the ground. Perfectly circular burn patterns in the dirt and gravel. What could make marks like these? She wondered aloud. Frank knelt down and touched one of the burns. "It's not from any chemical I know, and look at this." He held up a small metal device that had been sitting at the center of one of the circles. It was like nothing either of them had seen before, smooth silver metal with no visible buttons or screens, yet it seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. "Don't touch that," Susan said sharply. "We don't know what it is." As Frank put it in an evidence bag, Susan's radio crackled to life. "Sheriff? We're getting calls from all over town. People saying their electronics went crazy last night around 11:30. TVs turning on and off. Phones not working. Car alarms going off." Susan looked at the strange burn marks again. "Get Dr. Patel from the community college out here. She teaches physics. Maybe she can make sense of this." 2 hours later, Dr. Patel stood in Jack's garage, her handheld radiation detector beeping rapidly. "These readings are impossible," she said, her face pale. "The electromagnetic disturbance here is off any scale I've seen. And these burn patterns, they're consistent with what theoretical physicists have proposed might happen during a localized gravitational distortion." "In English, Doc," Susan said. Dr. Patel looked up at the sky. "Something came down here? Something that doesn't use any technology?" "We understand." Miles above Earth, beyond the reach of human detection systems, the massive ship called the Harvester continued its silent journey away from the planet. The ship was the pride of the Zorlek Dominion, a species that had mastered interstellar travel 5,000 years ago. To them, other species were simply specimens to be collected, studied, and catalogued. In the ship's central command chamber, Commander Vextel observed the small blue planet growing distant on the view screen. His scaled skin reflected the blue light, giving his already imposing figure an eerie glow. 4 arms operated different control panels simultaneously. "Another successful extraction," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Was there any detection?" "Science." Officer Kurzel consulted her data screen. "Minor technological interference in the immediate area. Nothing the primitives will recognize as our presence." "Excellent. And the specimen?" "Secure in containment chamber 3. This one is physiologically different from our previous human acquisitions. Older, with evidence of extensive physical training and multiple healed injuries." Commander Vextel made a dismissive gesture with one of his lower arms. "Irrelevant." Humans are all the same fragile creatures with limited intelligence and no significant defensive capabilities. As you say, Commander, Kurzo responded. Though something in her tone suggested uncertainty, the commander turned to his navigation. Officer, set course for the research station in the Cygnus sector. We'll add this specimen to our collection and continue our survey of this arm of the galaxy. Deep in the bowels of the ship, Jack Miller lay unconscious on a smooth metal platform. His body was restrained by invisible force fields, and various scanning devices hovered above him, recording every aspect of his physiology. Junior researcher Tesma watched the readings with interest. This was her first assignment on extraction mission, and she had been eager to see a human up close. They look so simple, she said to her supervisor. It's hard to believe they're the dominant species on their planet. Her supervisor, senior researcher Lomdar, had studied dozens of species across multiple star systems. Never judge a species by appearance alone. Even the simplest creatures can surprise you. As if on cue, Jack's eyes snapped open. Unlike other specimens who woke confused and terrified, thrashing against their restraints, Jack remained perfectly still. His eyes moved methodically, taking in every detail of the room, the equipment, and the aliens observing him. Tesma stepped back involuntarily. Its eyes, they're so focused. Lomdar activated the translation device. Human, you are aboard a research vessel. You will not be harmed if you cooperate with our studies. Jack said nothing. He continued his careful observation, his face betraying. No fear, only calm assessment. Lomdar tried again. Do you understand our language now? The translator should be functioning. After a long moment, Jack finally spoke, his voice steady. I understand perfectly. Where am I, and why have you taken me? You are approximately 340,000 of your kilometers from your planet. You have been selected for our xenobiological research program. It is an honor. Few of your kind have seen beyond their own atmosphere. Jack's face remained impassive. And after your research? Lomdar hesitated. The Zoralek never returned specimens to their home planets. The risk of contaminating primitive cultures with advanced knowledge was too great. But telling specimens this often led to unproductive emotional responses. That will be determined later, Lomdar said finally. Jack simply nodded. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, You should have left us alone. Lomdar dismissed the comment. Another primitive trying to sound threatening. The Zoralek had heard it all before from countless species. None had ever posed a real threat to them. As the researchers left the chamber, automated systems began the first series of tests. Outside, Tesma looked back through the observation window. Something feels different about this one, she said. They all seem unique until you've studied enough of them, Lomdar replied. In the end, this human will be just another entry in our biological database. But as they walked away, Jack's eyes followed them. And deep behind that calm gaze, something was already calculating, measuring, and planning. The Zoralek had made a critical error. They hadn't just taken any human. They had taken a warrior who had spent his life preparing for the worst possible scenarios. And now, the worst had come. 3 days passed in the containment chamber. Jack remained under constant observation by the Zoralek scientists. They subjected him to various tests: physical endurance, problem-solving, reaction to a stimuli, all of which he completed without complaint. Unlike other human specimens they had studied, Jack showed no signs of emotional distress or confusion. This both intrigued and unsettled the research team. The specimen's heart rate has barely changed since capture, Tesma reported to senior researcher Lomdar. Even during the pain response tests, Lomdar studied the data screens. Interesting. Either this human has unusual physiological control, or our understanding of their nervous system is incomplete. Jack lay on the examination platform, eyes closed but mind fully alert. He had been trained to maintain awareness even while appearing to rest. Each sound, each movement around him was carefully noted and remembered. The aliens' breathing patterns, the slight differences in their footsteps, the timing of shift changes, all valuable information. The force field that held him was strongest during active testing and weakest during what the aliens considered his sleep cycle. The observation devices, while sophisticated, had blind spots near the floor. The ventilation system was accessible through a panel approximately 3 meters from his platform. All these details Jack filed away without giving any indication. He noticed them. Commander Vextel entered the research lab, his tall form dominating the space. "Report on the human," he demanded. Kurzel, now overseeing the research, approached with a data tablet. "The specimen shows remarkable adaptability. Physical strength is above average for the species and pain tolerance is exceptional. However, it's the cognitive functions that are most interesting. Problem-solving abilities are significantly higher than previous human subjects." Vextel made a dismissive gesture. "Yet still primitive compared to Zoralek intelligence. Has it provided any useful information about human defense systems?" "It hasn't spoken much," Kurzel admitted. "Only basic responses to direct questions." The commander moved closer to the containment field, studying Jack with 4 large black eyes. "You, human, your species has developed primitive space travel. Tell us about your military capabilities." Jack opened his eyes slowly, meeting the commander's gaze. "We're just beginning to explore our own solar system. Our military is focused on Earth-based conflicts. So your kind has no defense against advanced species like ours?" Jack's face remained neutral. "None that I'm aware of." Vextel made a sound that might have been laughter. "At least it's honest. Continue the research. I want a complete neural map by the end of the cycle." He turned to leave. "Commander," Jack called out, his voice calm. "May I ask a question?" Vextel paused, surprised. Specimens rarely addressed him directly. "You may. Have you taken humans?" "Before me?" The commander considered for a moment. "Yes, 17 of your kind have been studied by our science division." "And what happened to them after your studies were complete?" Vextel's upper arms made a fluid gesture. "They became permanent additions to our biological archive, a great honor. Their knowledge and genetic material now serve the advancement of Zoralek science." Jack nodded slowly. "I see. Thank you for your honesty." After the commander left, Kurzel approached the containment field. "Your response to the commander was unusual. Most specimens become distressed when they learn they won't return home." Jack shrugged slightly. Getting upset wouldn't change anything. "Logical conclusion," Kurzel agreed, making notes on her tablet. "We'll continue testing tomorrow. Your cooperation is appreciated." When the research team left and the lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, Jack remained motionless for exactly 1 hour. He had counted the seconds precisely, knowing from observation that this was when the monitoring systems ran their self-diagnostic cycle. Moving carefully, he tested the strength of the force field. It responded to pressure, growing stronger when he pushed against it directly. But when he moved very slowly, almost imperceptibly, it adjusted more gradually. A flaw in the design, perhaps, or simply a power-saving feature. Either way, it was useful information. Jack couldn't escape yet, not with so many unknowns about the ship and its systems. But he could prepare. During each rest cycle, he performed small experiments. He discovered that the food containers they provided contained a metallic element he could extract. By carefully scraping the inside of his cheek with this metal, he collected a small sample of his DNA. When the medical drone came to collect biological samples, Jack managed to place his DNA sample on its sensor array, creating a false reading. That would show him still in the chamber even if he wasn't. On the 5th day, the tests became more invasive. The Zoralek used energy fields to stimulate different parts of his brain, recording his responses. It was painful, but Jack showed no reaction beyond the involuntary muscle spasms. "Its pain threshold exceeds our measurement capabilities," Kurzel noted. "And look at these neural patterns. They're unlike anything we've seen in previous humans." Tesma studied the brain scans. "This area here it's unusually active. According to our database, this region is associated with strategic thinking and threat assessment." "Interesting, but not surprising," Kurzel said. "Our previous specimens were civilians. According to its own statements, this one has military Training? Perhaps we should increase security protocols, Tesma suggested. Just as a precaution. Kurzel made that same dismissive gesture Jack had seen before. It's still just a human, Tesma. Their species hasn't even mastered interplanetary travel. What threat could it possibly pose to us? That night, when the observation systems were at their lowest power, Jack made his first real move. Using the metal he had collected, he created a small tool. Moving with extreme slowness to avoid triggering the force field's pressure sensors, he reached the edge of the platform. From there, he could access a small maintenance panel. The Zorlek hadn't bothered to secure it. Why would they? No specimen had ever attempted to escape before. Jack carefully removed the panel and studied the circuitry within. The technology was advanced, but the basic principles were recognizable. Power conduits, data transmission, environmental controls. Jack made a small, precise adjustment to one circuit. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms, just enough to create a minor fluctuation in the environmental systems. The kind of fluctuation that would require maintenance. The next morning, as expected, a maintenance drone entered the chamber. Jack lay still, appearing to sleep. The drone moved to the panel and extended its repair appendages. Jack watched through barely opened eyes, memorizing the sequence of actions. The access codes input, the locations of critical components. When the drone left, Jack allowed himself a small smile. The Zorlek thought they were studying him, but he was studying them just as carefully. Learning their systems, their routines, their weaknesses. In Pine Creek, Montana, Sheriff Susan Alvarez stared at the evidence board in her office. Photos of Jack's garage, the strange burn marks, the alien device they had found, now locked in a secure evidence box. Sheriff, Deputy Frank called from the doorway. Dr. Patel is here, says she has something important. Dr. Patel rushed in, her usually calm demeanor replaced by excited urgency. Sheriff, I've been monitoring electromagnetic frequencies since Jack's disappearance. Last night there was a pattern. A signal coming from somewhere beyond our atmosphere. A signal? Like what? The scientist placed a laptop on the desk, showing a sequence of regular pulses. It's not random. It's a pattern consistent with, she hesitated. With an SO, Susan leaned forward. You're saying Jack is sending a distress signal? From space? I know how it sounds, Dr. Patel admitted. But this signal contains fragments. Of military code, Navy code. Susan looked back at the evidence board, at Jack's service photo from his SEAL days. If anyone could find a way to send a message from God knows where, it would be Jack Miller. 2 weeks passed aboard the Harvester. Jack's days followed a routine of tests and examinations. The Zorlek scientists believed they were learning about human physiology and psychology. In reality, Jack was learning far more about them. He now understood their work shifts, security protocols, and the basic layout of the research section. During the night cycles, he continued making small adjustments to his containment chamber systems. Nothing big enough to trigger alarms, just minor changes that created the need for frequent maintenance visits. Each visit gave Jack more information. In the ship's command center, Commander Vextel reviewed the latest research reports. The human specimen continues to provide valuable data, Kurzel explained. Its problem-solving abilities are particularly impressive, and there have been no security concerns? Vextel asked. None. It has been a model specimen. Compliant and communicative. Junior researcher Tesma stood nearby holding a data tablet. She shifted uncomfortably, Vextel noticed. You disagree, junior researcher? Tesma hesitated before speaking. Commander, I've noticed some unusual patterns. Small system fluctuations in the containment area. Nothing serious, but they occur most frequently during the human sleep cycle. Equipment. Malfunctions happen, Kurzel said dismissively. The maintenance logs show nothing concerning. There's more, Tesma continued. 3 security drones have gone missing from the inventory. And twice this week, the human's life signs temporarily disappeared from our monitors before returning to normal. Vextel's 4 eyes narrowed. Could the monitoring equipment be faulty? We've checked it thoroughly, Tesma replied. Everything appears to be functioning correctly. I think what my colleague is trying to suggest, Kurzel said with obvious disapproval, is that a primitive creature with no knowledge of our technology somehow found a way to interfere with our advanced systems. The commander made a rumbling sound that signified amusement. An imaginative theory, perhaps, Tesma admitted. But this human has military training. On its planet, such individuals are specifically taught to escape captivity and survive in hostile environments. Vextel considered this. Your concern is noted, junior researcher. Increase monitoring during the sleep cycles and run a full diagnostic on all systems in the research section. He turned to leave, then added, but don't waste too many resources. On this, the specimen may be intelligent for its species, but it's still just a human. That night, Jack made his most daring move yet. Using the components he had carefully collected from maintenance drones and food containers, he created a small device that could temporarily disable the force field. He had only one chance to get this right. During the middle of the sleep cycle, when monitoring was at its lowest, Jack activated his device. The force field flickered and created a small opening just large enough for him to slip through. Moving quickly but silently, he reached the ventilation panel he had been studying for weeks. The panel came loose easily. Jack slid into the narrow shaft, replacing the panel behind him. He knew he had approximately 8 minutes before the next security scan would detect his absence. By then, he needed to be far enough away from the containment area that his DNA sample, placed strategically on a sensor node, would fool the system into thinking he was still there. Jack crawled through the ventilation system using the mental map he had created during his captivity. First objective, find a more secure hiding place. Second objective, gather more information about the ship and its vulnerabilities. After 20 minutes of careful movement, Jack found what he was looking for: a small maintenance room used for storing repair equipment. It was rarely visited, based on the dust patterns he had observed on the drones that came to his chamber. He forced open the ventilation cover and slipped inside. The room contained tools and spare parts for the ship's systems. Jack quickly found a secure place to hide behind some large equipment containers. From there, he could access a data terminal. The alien symbols were unfamiliar, but the patterns were logical. Jack had been studying the Zoralek language through his interactions with the scientists. He couldn't read everything, but he understood enough to navigate basic systems. For the next few hours, Jack explored the ship's maintenance networks. He discovered that the Harvester was on course for something called the Cygnus Research Station. Arrival time, 5 days. Once there, he would be transferred to a permanent facility. His window of opportunity was closing. Back in the research section, the night shift was ending. A lab assistant approached Jack's containment chamber for routine monitoring. The assistant looked at the readouts, noted that all vital signs were normal, and moved on. The deception was working. The next morning, Commander Vextel received an unusual report. Minor system failures throughout Deck 7, his operations officer explained. Environmental controls malfunctioning, security. Cameras going offline. "'Cause?" Vextel demanded. "Unknown. Commander. Maintenance crews find nothing wrong when they arrive, but the problems keep appearing in different locations." Kurzel, who was present for the briefing, looked concerned. "Deck 7 is directly above the research section. You don't think?" Vextel began, then shook his head. "Impossible." But doubt had crept into his voice. In his hiding place, Jack was busy creating more disruptions. Small, strategic system failures that would draw attention away from his actual location. He had also discovered something valuable, a communication node that allowed him to send short-burst transmissions. Using his knowledge of military coding, Jack sent another signal toward Earth. This one containing specific information about the ship and its destination. By the third day of Jack's hidden movement throughout the ship, the Zoralek could no longer deny something was wrong. Security systems reported strange movements in rarely used corridors. Equipment continued to malfunction. And most disturbing, personal items began disappearing from crew quarters: food, tools, even parts of uniforms. "Commander." Vextel called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. "The human specimen," he said gravely. "When was it last visually confirmed?" Kurzel checked the records. 3 days ago, Commander. And since then we've relied on sensor readings? Yes, but the readings are clear. The specimen is still in its chamber, showing normal life signs. Vextel slammed one of his 4 hands on the table. "Check it now, visual confirmation." A security team rushed to the containment chamber. What they found sent a wave of alarm throughout the ship. The human appeared to be there, sleeping on the platform until they deactivated the force field and touched him. The figure dissolved into a pile of materials, food containers, fabric, and a small device emitting fake biometric signals. The security chief immediately contacted Commander Vextel. "The human is gone." Vextel's voice was cold. "With fury. How long? Unknown, Commander. Based on the sophistication of this decoy, possibly days." "Find it!" Vextel roared. "Lock down all critical systems. Search every section of the ship." Tesma, who had been monitoring the conversation, spoke quietly to Kurzel. "We underestimated it, didn't we?" Kurzel had no answer. "In Montana, Sheriff." Susan Alvarez sat in her office with Dr. Patel and 3 stern-faced men in military uniforms. The lead officer, Colonel William Harrison, studied the signals Dr. Patel had recorded. "You're certain these came from beyond our atmosphere?" he asked. "Absolutely," Dr. Patel confirmed. "And they contain Navy SEAL emergency protocols, old ones." "But recognizable," Colonel Harrison nodded. "Jack Miller was one of our best. If anyone could find a way to communicate from a hostile situation, it would be him." He turned to Susan. "Sheriff, what you've stumbled upon here is part of something much bigger. We've been tracking unusual objects in our airspace for years. This is the first concrete evidence we have of—" He paused. Unwelcome visitors. So what now?" Susan asked. The colonel's face was grim. "Now, we implement the response protocol we've been developing for this exact scenario. If these beings think they can just take one of ours without consequences, they're about to learn a very painful lesson." Alarms blared throughout the harvester. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor. The ship was on full lockdown. Commander Vextel stood in the command center, his scaled skin darkening with rage. "How does one primitive creature evade our entire security force?" he demanded. Security Chief Mockstar looked uncomfortable. "The human appears to have extensive knowledge of our systems, Commander. It's using maintenance tunnels and service corridors to move around the ship." "That's impossible. It couldn't have learned so much in such a short time." Kurzel stepped forward hesitantly. "Commander, we may have underestimated this specimen's observational abilities. During testing, it showed exceptional pattern recognition and memory retention." Vextel's 4 eyes narrowed. "Find it. Use every drone, every sensor. I want this human back in containment or eliminated." Security teams spread throughout the massive ship. They carried stun weapons and scanning devices to detect human life signs, but Jack had already anticipated this. He had coated his body with a substance from the maintenance room that masked his heat signature. He had also placed small devices that mimicked human vital signs in multiple locations around the ship. Creating false readings on the alien scanners, Jack moved silently through a narrow service passage. He had spent the last day learning the ship's layout and identifying its critical systems. Now it was time to strike back. His first target was the security control center on Deck 5. Using tools he had gathered from various maintenance areas, Jack created a small explosive device. Nothing powerful enough to breach the hull, but sufficient to damage electronics and create confusion. He placed the device near a junction box, set the timer, and moved quickly to his next position. 2 minutes later, the explosion rocked the section. Alarms changed their tone as new emergency protocols activated. "Explosion on Deck 5, a technician reported. "Security Control Center is offline." Commander Vextel slammed his fist on a console. "It's attacking us now? This is beyond belief." "Sir," the weapons officer called, "security drones in Section 7 are not responding to commands. They appear to have been reprogrammed. Shut them down." "I'm trying, sir, but something is blocking our signal." Jack had indeed reprogrammed several security drones. It hadn't been difficult. The Zoralek programming language was logical, and once he understood the basic patterns, relatively easy to manipulate. The drones now responded to his makeshift control device, fashioned from parts he had collected. He directed the drones to a critical junction that connected the ship's engines to the command center. There they began disconnecting power couplings and rerouting energy flow. The ship shuddered as propulsion systems faltered. On the bridge, panic was spreading. Engine efficiency dropping? Power fluctuations throughout the ship, the engineering officer reported. How is this happening? Vextel demanded. No one had an answer. The Zoralek had never faced a situation like this. In all their centuries of collecting specimens from across the galaxy, none had ever escaped containment, let alone threatened their ship. Vextel made a decision. Deploy the elite capture team, full tactical gear. Lethal force authorized. 6 Zoralek soldiers larger and more heavily armored than the regular crew assembled in the armory. They carried advanced weapons and wore helmets with enhanced scanning capabilities. This unit was rarely used. Most specimens were easily contained, but they trained regularly for extreme situations. Your target is on Deck 6, their commander informed them. It has disabled several systems and reprogrammed security drones. Approach with caution. The team moved out, their heavy footsteps echoing in the corridors. Jack heard them coming. He had been monitoring communication channels using a device he had modified from a maintenance worker's tool. He knew they were heading his way. Instead of running, Jack prepared a trap. The waste processing chamber on Deck 6 contained chemicals used to break down biological material. These chemicals, when combined correctly, became highly reactive. Jack had spent hours preparing the mixture and rigging it to a simple trigger mechanism. He positioned himself in a visible spot at the end of a corridor, then quickly ducked into a side passage. As the elite team rounded the corner, they spotted him and charged forward. Jack retreated, leading them exactly where he wanted them to go. As the 6 soldiers entered the waste processing chamber, Jack activated the trigger from his hiding spot. The chemicals mixed and ignited, creating a massive explosion that rocked the entire ship. The blast wasn't deadly, but it filled the chamber with thick, disorienting smoke and damaged the soldiers' equipment while they struggled to regroup. Jack slipped past them and headed for his primary target, the communications array. He had saved this objective for last because he knew it would be heavily guarded. But with the elite team trapped in the waste chamber and regular security forces scattered throughout the ship dealing with his various diversions, the path was temporarily cleared. Jack reached the communications center and quickly subdued the 2 technicians on duty. He tied them securely, then turned to the main console. Using the knowledge he had gained, he began accessing the ship's long-range communication systems back on Earth. In a secure underground facility beneath a mountain in Colorado, Colonel Harrison and his team monitored space for any sign of the alien vessel. Sophisticated equipment, developed in secret over decades, scanned frequencies that most of humanity didn't know existed. "Sir," a technician called out, "we're picking up a transmission. It's using our encoding." The colonel rushed to the monitoring station. "Origin? Deep space, sir. Approximately 400,000 kilometers from Earth. Put it through." The message that came through was broken and static-filled, but clear enough. Hostile vessel. Coordinates follow. 17 humans held. Weapon systems vulnerable at. Prepare for ... 5 Earth vessels needed. Colonel Harrison turned to his second-in-command. "It's Miller. He's not just alive, he's taken control of their communications." "The coordinates are coming through now, sir." "Alert the response team." Operation Pushback is a go. In orbit around Earth, hidden from conventional detection systems, 5 sleek vessels powered up their engines. They had been built in secret, using technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien craft and information, gathered over decades of covert observation. Each ship carried a crew of 12 elite soldiers, trained specifically for space combat and rescue operations. Captain Lavra Hayes of the lead vessel, the Defender, received the transmission from Earth Command. "We have our target, people." 1. Of ours is up there, and he's cleared the path for us. Let's bring him home. The 5 ships broke orbit and accelerated toward the coordinates Jack had sent. Mankind's first interstellar combat mission had begun. Aboard the Harvester, Commander Vextel was losing control of his ship. Systems were failing throughout the vessel. Security forces could not locate the human. And now, most alarmingly, long-range. Sensors detected 5 unknown objects approaching rapidly. What are they? He demanded. The sensor operator looked up in disbelief. They appear to be ships, Commander. Their design is... They're Earth vessels? Impossible. That planet has no interstellar capability. But the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, humanity had developed space technology far beyond what the Zorelek believed possible. And now they were coming for their captured comrade. In the communications center, Jack smiled as he monitored the approaching vessels. The Zorelek had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that because humans didn't have a visible presence in space, they were incapable of space travel. They never considered that. Earth might have been watching them all along, preparing in secret for this very moment. The Harvester drifted in space, its main engines disabled and many systems offline. Jack moved quickly through the corridors toward the command center. Most of the crew had retreated there, hoping to regain control of their ship. They didn't. Realized that Jack had been herding them to that location deliberately. On the bridge, Commander Vextel watched in disbelief as 5 Earth vessels approached. They were smaller than the Harvester, but moved with surprising speed and precision. How is this possible? He demanded. The humans should have no knowledge of our existence. Kurzel looked up from a console with a grim expression. Commander, I've been analyzing their approach pattern. These aren't newly built ships. Based on their design and movement, they've been operational for years. You're suggesting they knew about us? All along? It appears so, and there's more. Kurzal's voice grew quieter. I've checked our research database. The 17 humans we've collected over the years all had military backgrounds or specialized technical knowledge. Vextel's scales paled. They let us take them as what, spies? I can't confirm that, but the pattern is concerning. The communications officer interrupted. Commander, the Earth vessels are hailing us. They're using our own communication frequencies. Vextel stared at the main screen as it flickered to life. A human female in a dark uniform appeared. Her expression was stern and confident. Alien vessel, this is Captain Lavra Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have illegally abducted citizens of Earth. Power down your remaining systems and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. Vextel's pride wouldn't allow him to surrender. This is Commander Vextel of the Zorelek Dominion research vessel Harvester. Your primitive vessels pose no threat to us. Retreat immediately or be destroyed. Captain Hayes smiled slightly. I believe you're overestimating your current tactical position, Commander. Your engines are disabled, your weapon systems are offline, and, she paused, you have an enemy combatant aboard your vessel. As if on cue, the doors to the bridge slid open. Jack Miller stood there, holding a makeshift weapon fashioned from alien technology. Behind him floated 3 reprogrammed security drones, their weapons pointed at the bridge crew. Hello, Commander, Jack said calmly. I believe we need to discuss terms of surrender. Vextel's forearms reached for his personal weapon, but Jack was faster. A burst of energy from his improvised weapon disabled the commander's armor, sending him crashing to the floor. I wouldn't, Jack advised the other crew members who looked ready to fight. I've spent 3 weeks learning how your systems work. Those drones will fire if anyone moves. Vextel glared up at Jack from the floor. One primitive human, how did you do this? Jack moved to the main console, keeping his weapon trained on the aliens. You made a fundamental mistake, Commander. You thought technological superiority meant you were superior in all ways. You never considered that adaptability, creativity, and determination might be more important than having 4 arms and fancy ships. Your species was primitive, confined to one planet. Jack laughed. Is that what you thought? We detected your first scout ships nearly 50 years ago. We've been watching, learning, and preparing ever since. Vextel's eyes widened. The other specimens? Some were taken by surprise, yes. But after the first few disappearances, we began to understand what was happening. The later ones? They volunteered for the mission. Impossible! Not for humans who are willing to sacrifice themselves to protect their planet. Jack turned to the communications console. Captain Hayes, the bridge is secure. You may begin boarding procedures. Well done, Major Miller, the captain replied. Boarding teams are on their way. 20 minutes later, Earth soldiers moved efficiently through the harvester. They secured the alien crew and began downloading the ship's database. In the research section, they found containment chambers holding other human captives, the ones who had survived the Zorelek experiments. On the bridge, Captain Hayes met with Jack. Your signal got through just in time. Another day and they would have reached their research station? Jack nodded. It was close, they're advanced, but they have blind spots. They never imagined we could be a threat. A mistake they won't make. Again, the captain handed Jack a tablet showing sensor readings. Their distress signal was sent before you disabled their communications. More of their ships are likely on the way. Then we need to move quickly. This ship contains technology that could help defend Earth. Captain Hayes nodded. Our engineers are already studying their systems. But you've given us something even more valuable, proof that, with enough ingenuity, we can fight back against their kind. In a secure room off the bridge, Colonel Harrison interrogated Commander Vextel. The alien leader had been stripped of his armor and restraints limited the movement of his 4 arms. How many more of your kind have been observing Earth? The colonel asked. Vextel remained silent. Let me be clear, Colonel Harrison continued. We're not interested in conflict, but we will no longer allow your species to abduct our people or treat us as specimens. You are specimens, Vextel finally responded. All life forms are categorized and studied by the Dominion. It is our right as the superior species. The colonel leaned forward. That superiority seems questionable now, doesn't it? 1 human dismantled your ship and crew in 3 weeks. Imagine what we could do if properly motivated. For the first time, uncertainty showed in Vextel's eyes. 3 days later, the Earth vessels approached their home planet, towing the disabled harvester. Inside the alien ship, engineers and scientists worked to understand every aspect of the advanced technology. The surviving human captives had been treated and were recovering, eager to share what they had learned during their captivity. In the observation room of the lead Earth vessel, Jack stood with Captain Hayes, watching as the blue planet grew larger. In the view screen, what happens now? Jack asked. Now we prepare, she replied. The Zorelek will send more ships when they learn what happened, and we'll be ready for them. Captain Hayes nodded. Thanks to you, we have their technology, their database, and most importantly, proof that they can be defeated. Jack looked out at Earth, his home. They thought we were primitive because we don't have their technology. They never understood that humans are defined by more than our tools. We're defined by our will to survive, our ability to adapt, and our refusal to surrender. The Zorelek made a critical error, Captain Hayes agreed. They took 1 human and thought there would be no consequences. And now they'll pay the price for that mistake, Jack said quietly. Not just with 1 ship, but with the loss of their belief in their own superiority. They'll never look at humans the same way again. As the ships approached Earth orbit, a message came through from command. New alien vessels had been detected entering the solar system. The Zorelek were coming, just as expected, but this time humanity wasn't unprepared. This time they weren't unknown prey to be studied and collected. This time they were hunters. Defenders, warriors. This time, the aliens would face a species that had learned their weaknesses and would never again be underestimated, all because they took 1 human, and that human fought back.